Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another Blame It on Marketing episode. Today, we're talking about a topic which is kind of a meta topic about how marketing is perceived as a career, I would say, and as a team within an organization. So, why are we perceived the way we are? How are we perceived? And maybe towards the end, how we might be able to change that a little bit. But before we get into that, I would love to have our speakers introduce themselves. With us today, we've got Sarah and Margaux. So, I don't know who wants to go first in terms of introductions.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of the show, so really excited to be here. I'm Margot, and I'm the founder of Ripple. And what I do is that I help marketing teams to build credibility inside their business, to also align better with other teams, such as sales. And I also help teams with their strategy. And I do that through a mix of training and collaborative workshops. And I also do fractional marketing work.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a very good friend of Margot's, and we've been working together for quite some time because I'm an executive coach and a business coach. I founded my own company just before Margaux, and we've been on a journey together of building our own businesses, supporting founders and leaders, and particularly in the life sciences industry for myself, because that's my background. I've got a neuroscience PhD, so I feel like I can really relate to some of the challenges that the scientists in the life sciences industry are experiencing. And I support Margaux in some of her work because being an executive coach, I have the opportunity to help people in maybe shaping what's happening to them and also working on some of the actions that might come out of Margot's work. So helping the leaders in the execution of some of the work that they've shaped with Margaux.
Amazing.
Excellent. That's a lovely combination, isn't it? To have someone coming in and supporting your marketing function and then being like, by the way, I know someone who can actually help their leaders get their stuff together. So that's excellent.
And you need it.
Excellent
making a good
pairing,
team.
ladies. But before we dig into the topic, we obviously love to get people's marketing/work confessions. So the biggest thing you've stuffed up in your career, if you don't mind. I don't mind who goes first.
So mine's not a marketing per se, but it is a big boo-boo, which now with the, 10 years before sort of period, I'm okay to share because it was a big boo-boo. It was much early on in my career and I meant really, really well. And I had access to lots of systems and I decided to be super helpful to my colleague. And she had a SharePoint page. And it was back in the days where SharePoint was this nice new thing that you could use for lots of different things. And I love learning new systems and new things. And so I felt like I kind of knew my stuff in SharePoint, and she'd given me access to her page and I thought, oh, there's a typo here. I'm going to be really nice. I'm going to tidy it up for her. I won't even tell her. I'll just do it. Except back in the days, if you pressed on the cross button, it deleted the site. It did not close the window. And I only found that out after my mistake because suddenly I thought, that looks a bit weird. It's looking a bit blank. Didn't think too much about it until about an hour later, she was fuming around going, I don't understand what's happened. And she went to IT, who went, well, it'll be your colleague over here who deleted your thing. And back in the days, it was a smallish company and it took them 3 days to recover her page from the IT backup. Luckily, there was a backup, but it was a beautiful site that she had created that I accidentally just pressed delete on. She has forgiven me, and it was an honest mistake. But it taught me not to try and muck around with other people's stuff without their permission.
I feel like in this perception conversation, eagerness to please is going to be something we talk about.
Yes.
Definitely.
It was with good intentions, and that was
Always
the
with good
thing.
intentions.
Exactly.
Awesome, Margaux. Over to you.
Yes, so I actually don't know which one to pick. I think as marketers especially, we've all done sending an email newsletter to thousands of contacts without any links. So I've done that. I've also broken very expensive product models 40 hours before a trade show. But there's one that will always stay with me, and that's because of the nature of the business I was working for. So I used to work for a medical device company where everything is very, very highly regulated. And I had just joined and I was responsible for the website. and I hadn't really taken note of when the SSL certificate was expiring. And it did expire, so the website sort of went down. A colleague said, "Oh, there's something weird happening on the website." And actually, because of how things were previously set up, it was not straightforward to put it back up. But I was actually really lucky in that I think it lasted about 26, 30 hours that we couldn't put it back up. But luckily, no one had subscribed to anything, which meant that there was no data breach, because if there was, it would have had to be escalated. They would have had this big security protocol happening. So I was quite lucky in that. But yeah, I didn't sleep for over 30 hours. I was pretty tired.
God, way to make people's lives hard by making the SSL hard. Like, let's not do that.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, useless.
So yeah, eagerness to please and fixing mistakes is probably the bread and butter of marketing teams. But in your opinions, guys, let's start with just the most basic question. What do you think people think of marketing teams and marketers?
I think for me, at least, I come from the world of science. Actually, my background, I'm quite similar to Sarah in a way, in that my background is marine biology, which is quite niche. And then I sort of kind of evolved into a marketing role throughout my career, and then spent the last 10 years working in marketing in science and tech. And actually, in the world of science, it's all about accuracy and precision. And then when marketing comes in, even though it's not the case at all, but they might seem, it might seem less tangible, not core to the business, and a bit fluffy. And actually, I thought that this perception was only for marketers in the field of science and tech. And then as I grew in my career, I spoke to marketers in different industries, and I found out that, yeah, it's not the case at all. And I think for me, it's for multiple reasons. I think external stakeholders in a company, I think marketing is all about, visual. And I think that comes from the older days of print advertising. Also, everyone is a consumer of marketing, and that doesn't help at all, especially with the rise of social media. But to me, the biggest reason is actually that as marketers, we spend a lot of time working on the external reputation that we have with our customers, our external brand. And, fair enough, that's what we're paid to do. But I think we should be a lot more intentional about how we build our internal reputation and internal brand with our internal stakeholders.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Well, I've been on the other side. I am those people.
You are
because I've never been in marketing, so I can tell you the secret. You're right.
That's what they think, Sarah.
Well, I used to think quite similarly to what Margaux is describing, which was that I was in charge of business operations, and I was probably more of a commercial partner than a marketing partner. And I used to rely heavily on an amazing marketing team, which I thought was doing a brilliant job, but I thought they were there to execute what the sales team had thought or what we needed. So they were very much an amazing team that could make things happen magically, sometimes push back, but very often we're trying to say, yes, okay, we'll try and squeeze it. Sounds like a really good idea. And I used to have loads of amazing ideas, and I used to think they just make stuff happen. It's amazing, but very much the reactive team. And what really changed for me actually is 2 years ago, I started up my own business, and suddenly I'm in charge of marketing, and I'm also working with the Judge Business School supporting founders. And now I'm really understanding that the journey of a company starts with understanding your customer and, your value proposition. And that's when you really need a strong marketing person. So I've upped on my marketing skills throughout my business, because now I really understand really what the marketing department can do and the strength that it brings if you leverage on them properly.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that you still, as you were describing the previous example, you were like, oh, I was in commercial, and then there was the marketing team, and it's like, no, the marketing team should be in the commercial team. Like, it's all the same, and it should be connected. But yeah, I think that's a super common way for people to see the different. It's like sales bring in sales, and then marketing do stuff. That's nice, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the things that even when we're working with clients now, and Ruta and I generally tend to work in B2B SaaS, um, is that marketing is taken definitely more seriously. Like it is in most cases in SaaS, it's like we see marketing as part of the commercial function, but there is still. So I feel like we've come on quite far from some of this stuff that historically used to sort of hold us back. But I think there is still a bit of a perception issue when it comes to like maybe how marketing actually works, where they spend their time. I know I have suffered, for example, with people being like, well, you're not getting a lot of actual stuff out the door. Like they expect like volume rather than quality, things like that, because there's a kind of like basic lack of understanding about the sort of mechanics that sit behind it. So I feel like in some businesses they're like way ahead, and in others they're still lagging behind, thinking that we're kind of the visual people or the sales kind of dog's bodies. Not great. So I guess that kind of moves us on to, you know, and we've talked about this quite a few times, believe it or not. Is that our fault? Is it other people's perception? Do you think probably a bit of both? But what do you guys think?
Well, actually, you touched upon something. You said something about volume. You know, people might say you're not producing enough content, but actually, and it links to the answer to your question, because I think there are things that we do as marketers, or at least as a marketing team, you know, in-house marketing teams, that we might not realize that is fueling that reputation. And I think one of these things is what I call, you know, being the content machine. So always producing, and then other things as well. Always being the yes team. So as Sarah was saying, you know, the team that executes, but also there are loads of other things that marketing teams don't realize that they do. So for example, not talking about your work internally often enough. I think we're all guilty of, you know, sharing the wins and like sharing the campaigns that have worked really well, but not sharing more about the lessons that we've learned along the way.
Because I've worked with Margaux, and what I really liked when we used to work together is what she brought over time that changed things for me. And that's before I was running my own company, but in the company that I met her, is the fact that she spent the time sometimes in company meetings. So I was a senior leader, you know, everyone had a turn to talk about updates. And what I really started understanding is when Margaux spoke about what was happening in marketing, she related it to the business strategy. So she started by saying, well, this is, you know, the traffic on the website. And I didn't know anything about the actual terminologies and what actually it really meant, but I could read a graph. And if she said, well, can you see at this point we gained these many clients, or we have this open rate, and that meant that we managed to bring on this new client because they knew about us, or we don't have any traction on this page and we changed the website and now we have traction and we have presence, and now I could see then client interest. I was thinking, well, that totally makes sense in our bigger strategy of acquiring this type of client. So I think that's the thing, is that explaining to people, how does that link back to the strategy, not just the commercial strategy, but even just a wider business strategy, really helps non-marketing people appreciate where they fit and what's the value that they bring to an organization.
Sorry, go on, Margaux.
No, I was going to say, yeah, absolutely. I think, there's a big part of maybe, you know, marketing teams don't do enough is, not talking enough about their work, not being, not sharing the lessons learned, always being the yes team. And I think another part of, you know, the things that we might not realize we do that is impacting our reputation is also, for example, if you want to start a new marketing initiative, if you want to ask for budget, is actually asking for approval rather than making a business case. So I think there's all these little things and more that actually is fueling that perception of marketing. So I think for me, you know, obviously, I think both sides are to blame, especially as I think that there's still a lot of CEOs that underestimate marketing a lot. And I think that's a real shame. But I think that we should look introspectively a little bit and think, okay, what do we do as well that is not doing us a service? And I think it's one, being really intentional about building that internal reputation, but also being self-aware about what we do.
A little bit of, not to gang up on Sarah, but obviously as we've got you here, so you were
Go
talking,
for it. You've got the
Yeah, like-
opportunity. I will be completely transparent.
I know, I've got no doubt that you will be, but I guess the little bit of, it's not pushback exactly, but one of the questions that a lot of marketers have and a lot of frustration that we have around these conversations is you yourself, you clearly are a conscientious person, obviously, because now look at what you do as a job, but sometimes we do walk into meeting rooms where we are faced with, in particular, maybe a sales leader or a CFO. You know, there's some particularly difficult conversations at times where the person in front of us isn't actually interested in finding out about the mechanics. So like when Margaux goes into the meeting and says, oh yeah, but look, here's a graph and this is what happened, and they're not interested, or perhaps like sometimes they're like, well, yeah, but could you do that again? You know, there's a bit of like either animosity or lack of belief in what marketing are presenting. What would you suggest we kind of do with those people? Because I think, you know, like the over communication, all of those sort of things, I think a lot of marketers know that. But yeah, fundamentally, sometimes we are presented with people that are a bit like,
they're already negative. Like they already expect the worst. Not the worst, that's dramatic, but like they already are looking at you, regardless if they worked with you or not before, being like, whatever.
I think that there's definitely an element that lots of people are like that, not just in respect to marketing, but I've had similar conversations with people in the regulatory function who go, you know, no one understands compliance and doesn't take it seriously. So I would say it's probably a combination of lots of things. And I think building good relationships and trust with the teams is super important, and that takes time. But I would say maybe starting with what's in it for them. So painting it like when you do with a customer, you know, when you're articulating how your product is going to benefit them, you know, you don't want to go down these are all the fabulous features of my product, and this is why it's going to help you. It's what's the problem you're experiencing, and this is how my product is going to help you fix your problem. So having that mindset of selling that and selling this idea, selling this concept to them, and what's in it for them, and really getting their perspective and being curious as well. So don't assume that they know everything, they're not engaged, but ask them questions. So by actually being curious and also engaging with them in their language, in their perspective, you will sell your idea. And you're marketing people, so you're brilliant at that anyway. So it's about framing it as selling an idea.
Yeah, and I think it's a funny one, because as marketers, there's loads of things that we do to like talk to our customers, but we rarely think about doing it for our internal stakeholders. So it's exactly what Sarah was saying. But, you know, for example, we're so used to doing buyer personas for customers, but we never think about doing that for our internal stakeholders. But I think it's actually super useful to know, first of all, map who you need to influence internally, and also try and like draw a picture of who are they, what needs do they have inside the business, what sort of pressures do they face, what motivates them, and to sort of like draw a picture, and it will tell you how to get to know them. So you'll get to know them better, and you'll know how to influence these people, and talk their language, know what they care about, and make your marketing more impactful that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you guys. I think you also do have to have a bit of a game plan, don't you? So like, for example, you know, Sarah, you were saying this about building good relationships and trust with people, and the way to do that. But I think once you've done that, if you know you're like, I don't know, you want to ask for more budget, or you're about to launch a campaign and you want everyone's buy-in, but you know you're conscious of who the kind of people are that maybe are a bit more negative or are not quite on your side yet, you can go to that person first and be like, okay, so this is what we want to do, this is what's in it for you, we're going to have this meeting, how can I get your backing for this publicly in a room? And be that kind of overt with people who are negative.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think quite a lot of people appreciate that approach. There are some people who are like, whoa, 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 we don't need to play politics. But there are other people who genuinely do appreciate that approach at times. And it's annoying we have to do it, but I have seen it firsthand work quite well. So,
yeah,
you know, I think don't be afraid to play the kind of house of cards moves sometimes. I don't know if you guys agree.
Yeah, I think it's all.
Sorry, go for it.
I think it's part of being, you know, deliberate about how you shape your internal reputation. Absolutely.
I was going to say it's influencing. I think if it's done with positive intent, integrity, and professionalism, then that's fine. That's how you will advance your career. And that's how you start influencing outside of your sphere of current influence, because you're being visible to other senior leaders who take you seriously because you've got something important to say. And that takes time. So by building these influencing relationships, you will be able to have a conversation with somebody about a budget that you're really passionate about. And it might be that it's far more comfortable to do that when you were having a catch up at the coffee machine, because you know that they're there and you see them pretty much every day, and you have a chit chat at the coffee machine, and the time that you want to actually have a proper conversation, you've built that relationship with the person, and they will make time to listen to you, and they will take you seriously. And yeah, there's no magic wand that will make that happen. It's your time and effort in building those relationships with people.
I think it's not a stretch, and please just disagree with me if you disagree with me. It's not a stretch to say that this is a key skill for anyone looking to advance in their career. Like, without this, you're hoping that you will get really lucky, end up in a really great organization that already gets you and that will be interested in what you're doing. But chances are you won't, or even if it is a great organization, everyone's doing their own thing and everyone's busy. So you have to advocate for yourself and for what you're doing and for your team. So without that skill, kind of moving forward is going to be really, really tough, I think, in your career, or even in the things that you want to do within the team. If you want more budget, or if you want to do different stuff, or whatever it might be.
I was going to say, don't be afraid to also elevate other people. I find the most joy is to connect people and see the magic happen, that people are going to be starting to work together, or you recommend them, or you say, well, you should talk to so-and-so because you're being helpful and you're being seen as a connector and somebody who understands the business in depth. It can be really helpful as well in advancing your careers. Just go outside of your marketing sphere and actually be really interested in having conversations with people all around the business, because it will give you that business acumen that is so hard to describe.
Yeah. And I think, getting actually genuinely curious about people's work. So for me, I used to work in, science and tech, and asking engineers about what their work, what they did, they absolutely lit up. But actually, not only you're building relationship with your colleagues, which is, really important, but also it allows you to build that picture, build these internal personas that are then really essential to kind of influence your work as well. But what I wanted to say earlier actually is, so all of this, how to manage stakeholders and how to build that internal reputation, it's not in any job description. And I think it's something that's really, really hard to do. And ultimately you just learn it on the job.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's also like a muscle that you build, isn't it? Right. So the more you practice, the stronger the muscle, the easier it gets, I think, because quite a lot of marketers find that difficult, that even just dipping your toe in feels like, oh, this is really painful, I shouldn't have to do it. There's usually a bit of frustration and resentment maybe around making the first move. But yeah, you practice, right? You don't necessarily have to go straight for the C-suite. You can, like you said, you can build relationships with people who show you a bit of, I don't know, internal support for marketing. Like you build your little group of advocates around you. And that's not to say you then go and build a little clique that go off and bitch about how shit the CEO is or whatever. That's not what we mean. But you build up that group of people who, when you have got a campaign coming out, or whatever it might be, they are the ones in Slack or Teams being like, yeah, well done, that's awesome. In the same way that you would do that for them when they do something awesome, you would, like Sarah was saying, you would call them out, you would lift them up, you would offer that opportunity. And as you kind of practice that, I think you then feel like you can sit down and have the bigger conversations with the more senior people if you're worried about doing that. Because I know that to begin with, that can be a bit scary, right?
Yeah. And actually, as part of a project, I was interviewing a lot of senior marketing leaders in different industries. And one of them said actually that managing stakeholders, and especially educating the wider business about what marketing does and why it's valuable, it's not in any job description. But actually, when she started doing it, it became part of the job that she loved the most, because she saw that it had massive rewards.
If I may, just one thing that I recommend. So I do a lot of support to senior leaders, but also I'm really passionate about empowering, especially women starting their careers. And one thing that I always bang on about is get a mentor. You might not be able to afford a coach. fair enough. But a good mentor, somebody who's got your back within your organization, can be massively helpful, because they will lift you up. They will give you feedback. You can go to them and go, hey, I want to approach so-and-so. I'm not quite sure how to do it. Can you help me? So an older sister, maybe somebody who can really help you just go in there and feel a little bit more confident. I've had some people who've been massively influential in my career because they've given me feedback or suggestions of how to approach things. And it doesn't need to be your line manager. It can be somebody actually outside of your marketing team who is able to just give you a completely different perspective. So don't feel like you've got to wait for that mentoring scheme to pop up. What stops you from actually going to see somebody that you respect and you want to get some valuable input and say,
everyone's going to be flattered to be asked anyway.
exactly.
Like,
It's
you're not
a
going to,
huge compliment.
yeah,
I
you're not
love
going to
it.
be met
Yeah.
with like, sad faces, because you're going to be asking them to be
Yeah,
your
but
mentor.
you need
asking
to
for,
take the
some help.
initiative. It's
Yeah.
up to you to make that first move, and it's up to you to continue in the relationship. I've been a mentor many times, and I'm not going to chase you to go, hey, when are we meeting next? It's on you to say, I need you, Sarah. Can we have a coffee? And it's on you to say, I'm too busy right now with this amazing project. Can we meet in 2 months' time? And that relationship will evolve over time. They normally fizzle after a while, and that's okay. It means that, that relationship has had what it needed to do, and the person moves on and has grown, hopefully in some way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's very valuable. There is something about when we talk about, all of this very, very positive stuff, to take it back to something slightly negative. There are definitely kind of double standards in companies, right? So like, for example, one of the classic ones is obviously the sales and the marketing relationship, and how sales can demonstrate usually sometimes personally quite bad behaviors, but because they get a win, because they, are seen to be driving the revenue and closing deals, they can kind of get away with not nurturing relationships and not doing some of this
Being
stuff. Being dickheads, basically.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, marketers seem to spend quite a lot of time, or good marketers do, nurturing those relationships. But then when you look at the tenure of people like CMOs or directors of marketing, they're really short. And a lot of the time that's because the internal relationships go south, or things didn't happen quickly enough, or whatever it is. So I'm just interested in your guys' perspective on that. And, is there anything we can do to help kind of like iron out some of those double standards? What do you guys think about that? Have you actually like witnessed it yourselves?
Yeah, definitely. I think the marketing sales divide is such a huge topic. And I think actually where there are double standards, it's basically a symptom of how marketing is perceived within the organization, especially when there's blame that's bounced around. It just screams that, marketing and sales are working in silos. And I think it's a funny one, because sales and marketing, they have the same goal, the same mission, which is growth, but they experience it in a completely different way. And I think it's part of the reason why we don't align is because of that. So for example, you take brand marketing, growth takes time, and then you compare it to sales, and sales is a lot more fast-paced. And I think because of this fast pace, then sales, they just bring in the numbers, they bring in the customers, and when marketing has to work maybe twice as hard, I don't know.
Or as long.
Or a song, yeah, exactly. And yeah, so for me, like when there's blame being bounced around, I think it means, the team is working in silos. And there are two different ways that marketings are perceived within organization. So there's either marketing being a support department or marketing being a strategic driver of growth. And obviously it's a spectrum, it's not all black and white. But I think for those organizations, when marketing and sales are not integrated, and sales think, okay, marketing are here to just output anything we want, I think it's about taking a step back and completely resetting that relationship. And for me, it starts by setting these expectations, which starts by, educating sales about what you do and how you do it. So finding advocates, we've talked about that, Emma. I think it's super important. So maybe find the person within the sales team that has a softer spot for marketing, getting close to them and getting them to be a real advocate for you when you're like not in the room. And then as the relationship progresses, I think it's about having shared metrics, shared goals, but also being really transparent about what you do. I think, it should work both ways, but I think marketing can start by being transparent about what has worked, what hasn't worked, etc. You're testing something, you are launching a new campaign, tell them what you measured, the assumptions you made, what worked well, what didn't work so well. And I think you're like shifting this accountability, from blame to ownership. And I think that's where internal credibility actually starts to be built.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Margaret. I'm interested, Sarah, as well, from your perspective, because obviously you work a lot with leaders, and this must be one of the things that kind of comes up. How do you manage it from like a leadership point of view? If you've got a CEO and they're like, oh my God, marketing and sales, they just hate each other. Where would you start with that?
Well, funnily enough, alignment and getting them to be in the same room and have conversations and agree together on what the strategy is a massive thing, which is why I'm such a big fan of Margaux's work, because I can see how it can really work to everybody's advantage. So while marketing might be the one suffering right now, everyone's suffering at the end of the day because the business is not successful if there is not good alignment between the different teams. So it's in everyone's interest to move forward. And yes, the CEO is probably thinking, what's going on here? What's happening? So having somebody independent actually can be super useful, because you're very neutral. You come in, you don't have any sort of hidden agendas, or you're not trying to be political and try and sway things. And it can help people actually just step away from the daily business and have a look at what's happening and going, okay, let's have a grown-up conversation here. Where do we want to be? And that's why it is important for the CEO to be very clear and directive in what they're expecting, and having a really good strategy, but also some metrics behind their strategy to know what's going to, how are we going to measure when it works. And then you can then bring that to every department's level and say, well, within your department, what does that look like? And how are you going to work with your colleagues in order to deliver that? Because we can't work in silos. So it has to be about, how are you going to be collaborating with that department in order to achieve your goals? You might be measured and you might have some bonus on something very specific, but I bet you that it's nothing to do with just your job. You're going to need a whole team of other people for you to succeed. So why not actually plan how it's going to work and align on those objectives at the beginning of the year, rather than midpoint of the year going, hey, you're not helping me with this campaign, or you're not helping me win that client. Why didn't you have a conversation at the beginning of the year to say, right, together, this is what we're going to do. We want to bring in this much amount of work. This is what I can do. This is what you can do. Let's put our heads together and make it work. So grown-up conversations tend to be forgotten sometimes, because it's about me and my objectives and my work, whereas actually you need a team behind you and you need colleagues to help you.
Yeah, and it actually links back to, when you want to kind of like improve the reputation of the marketing team inside the business, you need to be a lot more strategic, and you need to show that you're being strategic as well. Because otherwise, if you're not really saying, what you're doing, people only see the behavior. So if they only see, the number of posts that you put out, the assets that you create, but without understanding the reason why you're doing things and how everything is attached to a strategy, that's your reputation going down the drain. But I think actually you can have a good marketing strategy, and you cannot basically be a strategic driver to the business as a marketing team if you don't have a really clear overall business strategy. And I've worked for so many companies that did not have a clear business strategy. And I thought, how is the team supposed to then have a strong marketing strategy, help sales, bring in the leads, if there's no clear strategy above it all?
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that. Like, if you're not having a strategy and not setting goals based on that strategy, and then having teams work towards those goals, oh my God, alignment is hard, because everyone just goes off and does whatever the F they want to be doing because of whatever reason they want to be doing it, right? So yeah, if you're still at a company as a marketer that is not setting goals, not setting collaborative goals, then maybe that is something that you can start within your own team and then spread to other teams, because that is a huge helper. And it means everyone's stuff is on a document and everyone knows what everyone's doing and why we should be working together, instead of just feeling like marketing is asking you for shit again.
Yeah. The other thing is, I was chatting to some OD people, because, the OD people Organizational design people, by the
design.
way, obviously think about this stuff a lot. This is their job. And, I think one of the things that a lot of, let's say, revenue functions the trap they fall into is setting up this very traditional marketing sales setup where it's like, there is a CRO who is generally a senior salesperson. There is a head of marketing. There is, there are AEs, there are SDRs, there are marketing specialists, whatever. And what they don't often take into consideration is who are the best people managers, who are the best specialists in your department. And so I would say that one of the things that if you really have an organization where you're like, God, this just is not working, I think I would take it back to some of that as well. I would look at the design of the function and say like, okay, yeah, we've got a strategy, we've got goals. Obviously, those are fundamental things that you need regardless of who's in your team. But have we set these people up for success in the first place if we've got people at the top who aren't great people managers, who aren't strategists or whatever? I know it's quite a lofty thing to say, isn't it? But actually,
but you can start within your own team, right? Like you can start looking at your own team and be like, okay, our sales cycles are 24 months and we just have, I don't know, generic marketing people. Should they be like working in different ways and, sectioning their work off in different ways because the sales cycle is so massive or whatever, thing is that is kind of the limiting factor or the problem? I totally agree. I would actually love to see a revenue team that's split by funnel. Not because the funnel's perfect, but to be like, okay, you team work on this front bit, you team work on this middle bit, and you team work on this end bit of closing. I wonder what that would look like.
If you think about how devs work, that's quite often, isn't it? It's like you got front end and back end, and it's like, well, actually, why? And then marketing's not that different in many ways.
If anyone's doing that, can you please message me and tell me how it's going?
Please tell us what you're doing differently if you've got your marketing team set up differently.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yes, Margaux.
No, I was just going to say that, it's kind of the default, is you just have like marketing on one side, sales on one side, but like, have a look at the overall goal of the business. And then do you need to separate those functions? Like, why can't it be just one team?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So obviously the podcast is called Blame It on Marketing because people blame shit on marketing and we can often be the scapegoat for things. But one of the really common situations I think that Emma and I see, and that's because we work with kind of early stage businesses, is that marketing ends up being the kind of scapegoat for bad product market fit, where like you just can't outmarket a bad product market fit. So how do we also go around having those conversations and making sure that we're not held accountable and we're not the only people that are held accountable for that in the organization, but it's kind of a whole revenue team and ultimately the business strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, so I come from B2B marketing, so selling services rather than products, but I think ultimately, it's the same thing. To me, it's about, bringing people on the journey with you. If, they're blaming marketing for whatever wrong is, if they're blaming marketing for something that's happening, then it's about, okay, saying, well, this is the assumptions that we made. This is what we tested. This is what the market is saying, and bringing people on the journey with you and saying, okay, well, let's do an experiment. We're going to change the message, or we're going to change this and that about marketing. And then if it works, great, it was a marketing issue. But if not, then it probably means that it's a product issue. So for me, it's about bringing people on the journey with you and framing it as an experiment, to kind of like get a sense of like shared curiosity.
Yeah.
I would just add, without being, sorry.
No, Sarah, go.
I was just thinking from a completely outsider's perspective, but having supported a lot of founders on that journey, I think there's probably also a perception that it's easy to get it right and not enough effort is put into having those conversations at the beginning of product development. People get really passionate, very techy on things, and then they kind of get sucked into that wonderful world of product development and having all these different rounds of improvements, and they get really super passionate and excited typically, because it's something that hopefully is going to make an impact, solve a problem, etc. But actually starting from right at the beginning, like really what's the market, really what are your user needs, often that gets, from what I've seen, done as a bit of an exercise because everyone needs to do it, rather than no, actually this is gold, we're going to get really juicy things that are going to make our product better. And not being a marketing person myself, it's actually really hard to do that if you don't know how to. So I think sometimes founders are really excited about the techie bit, but forget to bring in some really trusted partners in that original journey. And it can be something that you can outsource, right? And go and get a consultant who is specialist in doing that and who can bring in the insights and the tools for you to get those juicy bits of information that will inform your actual product design. Not knowing, I'm supporting right now a doctor and doing a medical device, and he's super passionate about it and he's sure that is going to make an impact. But I say, that's your doctor's view. Have you spoken to a patient? Oh, I have had thousands of patients. Yeah, but have you actually carried out interviews about your patients and asked them what they need? Why would they use your product? And it's just shifting that perspective that I think people struggle with. I struggle with, and you really have to invest time in it. It's not magic. It's not going to happen straight away. So bringing in some trusted partners if you don't have the resources internally, or knowing to reach out to your trusted partners in the company is super important. But coming back to our point about being visible, if you don't know that you have that talent in your organization, you might not leverage on it. Do say, I can help you with this, or have you thought about that? Or how is it going? I think that can be super helpful. And was saying, Emma, about, the CEO sees things not happening. Leaders can't see it happening very well. And it's super helpful if somebody who sees it can go and have a honest conversation with them and go, hey, I think I can help you with this. Or have you thought about that? I'm curious, how did you get to that point? Because I'm not going to help my customer if I don't have these difficult conversations with him. He wants me to help him put the product on the market from a regulatory perspective as a business consultant. But I had to have a difficult conversation about, are you really sure you know your market?
Yeah, I can imagine. I think one of the things that I'd love to see as well, people have as kind of like either a business goal or a line in the strategy, is do we know this is fit for purpose, or does this have a purpose, or do we know this aligns to our ICP, no matter what part of the business that's for? So like product, sales, CS, whatever it is. So that we know it's been validated, and that it's something that it's a standard that we hold ourselves as an entire business accountable for, because quite often validation and ICP work sort of starts and stops in marketing, and actually it's something that everyone in the business should be doing.
Or
But
becomes
again,
what you wish it was, right?
yeah,
As well. That's a big thing, working
Yeah.
towards something that you wish it was, rather than actually being brutal and honest about what you are
what it
doing
is.
right now.
Yeah, but I think if it's a standard that's set from a founder or a CEO, I feel like it's something that the whole business can get behind, and basically it's like, well, we won't go ahead with this project unless it's been validated because it says so in our company goals or our whatever, our
Ways of work.
ways we work, or whatever it is. I think that's one way to kind of make sure it happens.
Absolutely.
So we've come to the end of the episode, ladies. So thank you so much. But before we let you go, we always like to end with some marketing/work gossip. So have you got anything juicy that you either love or hate that's going on right now that you want to share with us?
I basically have a thing about, these LinkedIn marketing gurus that say, oh, I have this technique for you to get 30, 40, 50 leads a month, whatever. Just, join my training, join my webinar. And then you join and there's absolutely zero value given. And it's all a sales pitch. And it honestly annoys me so much. And for me, it's to get value, you need to give value. So, what are you doing? Yeah, I would say that's, at the moment, that's the thing that annoys me the most.
It's rubbish, isn't it? Rubbish behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sarah?
Well, if we're on the theme of LinkedIn, it just popped in my head as Margaux was saying, I'm going to flip it and say, I love using LinkedIn to get to learn new stuff from people, not just in my industry, but outside of my industry, but on themes and topics that I'm particularly interested in. And recently, I've really enjoyed being a bit braver and actually commenting really with intent, not, oh, I have to comment, but starting to comment on some people's work because I have some insights or I have some questions, etc. And thinking, oh, I wonder what will happen. And out of that has come a couple of people that I hugely respect, who I now have never met in my life, but I feel like I know them very well. We DM each other and we support each other. They comment on my stuff and, you know, I might send them a recommendation or things like that. And I like to think that that's some of the really nice things about LinkedIn still, even though the algorithm, etc., you know, is problematic. I find that something that, you know, if you want to be expanding your career and wanting to go out of your industry or your department, actually looking at some people that you think they're pretty cool, they've got something really smart to say, not just from learning from them and reading their post, but start engaging with them, and you might have some fabulous conversations and maybe some coffees with them.
Can agree more. This is how me and Emma make friends now. It's all internet friends turning into real friends. Yeah.
Yeah, here as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I'm hoping that if you're listening to this episode, you found it useful. If you want kind of, I guess, more specifics, or you have a situation that you want to discuss, feel free to get in touch with either Margaux or Sarah or us, whatever feels best for you. And yeah, we're super excited about seeing you on the next episode.